Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Greg Marcel Dixon. You are a candidate in South Carolina's 6th District for Congress, and you are running against 3-decade incumbent James Clyburn, who, progressives nationally might have some thoughts on. Obviously, Clyburn is beloved in South Carolina, has rarely even been primaried that I know of. So credit to you for putting up a fight. The early voting is already beginning in South Carolina, which is a first, and the election is next week. So I really wanted to have you on. I've been digging into this district. There's some things going on there that, as far as I could tell, Clyburn isn't doing anything about. But first, I wanted to ask about you. You were born in Georgia, then moved to South Carolina. You have quite an interesting story from reading your bio. Can you, tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my family has always lived in South Carolina, going back at least since the mid 1700s, probably further back than that. But the paper trail for me, as far as I have been able to go, stops in the mid 1700s. I'm in a coastal rural county called Jasper County in the southern tip of the state. It's a very rural county, so we go to Savannah, Georgia for a lot of our needs. So I've always lived in South Carolina. My parents have always lived in South Carolina. I have relatives in Georgia, obviously, because it's just a little slither of the Savannah River that separates us. But no, we were living in South Carolina. My mother had 3 of her children, my second oldest brother, my younger sister, and I, over in Savannah. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 17 years, and I'm running against Congressman James Clyburn, and I'm running for this country to repair the damage that has been done to Black Americans, descendants of American slaves, via reparations. So that is the basis of my platform. I have others like universal health care, things progressive loves. I even have a brand new idea that people always tell me they never heard of before, and that is the way we have a home buyers program. I have a car buyer assistance program and a car maintenance program, because being in a rural area, anyone who lives here can tell you, you don't have a car, you can't get anywhere. We have food deserts in my community. We have healthcare deserts. You can drive for 10 to 20 miles and not pass a gas station, let alone a grocery store or a hospital or a clinic. So transportation is a big need. I have other things too, but that's the gist of it.
Mm-hmm. And can you kind of talk about specifically reparations at the moment? I mean, we've heard kind of talk from national politicians, well, we should study it. California right now has, I don't know, a committee or something that just issued a report, but they didn't put a price tag on it or, really give any signals for actionable steps to make it happen. What is your plan? Because frankly, people like Congressman Clyburn are clearly against it.
Right. He's changed his tune since I've started running, and since he's been getting pressure put on him by grassroots reparationists such as myself, but thousands and thousands, probably millions of others. But my reparations platform is actually going to be a model of what the Republicans actually offered, the Republicans of old, when they were actually the pro-Black American Party. Abraham Lincoln signed Special Field Order 15 into legislation. I have a special connection to that bill because my family still has land from that act. That's where the 40 acres of the mule saying comes from. It was done right here in South Carolina. They met in Savannah, Georgia, but Special Field Order 15 gave land, all the Sea Islands, 30 miles inland, starting at Charleston, South Carolina, all the way down to Jacksonville, Florida, and all the Sea Islands. So it includes Savannah as well. Of course, as we know, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. His very racist, anti-Black, bigoted scumbag of a vice president, Andrew Johnson, rescinded the act and gave the land back to the traitorous Confederates. Some of Black Americans, like my family, fortunately enough, was able to get the land back because of tax default sales and things like that, but we don't benefit from it as far as equity goes, because it's in a system called heirs property, where you have to share the land with other relatives and none of you can get any value from it. The most you can do is put a mobile home on the property. So my reparations plans calls for what this country has done In the past, for other groups, Native Americans, several of them, Japanese Americans, the Holocaust survivors, direct monetary payments, okay? Bringing back the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency of the government that's supposed to deal with all of the needs of those that were formerly enslaved and their descendants. Make sure we had land, housing, quality housing, well-paying jobs, healthcare, food, protection. If it had been allowed to do its job, Black America and the United States of America as a whole would look really different, much better, but it was sabotaged by Congress. I want to bring that back. I want to get us compensation for our land. Black Americans have had 15 million acres of the 60 million acres of property that our ancestors fought to get and fought to keep. The number one cause of lynching was land theft. I want us to get compensated for that land, and then I want us to return to our ancestral land in the American South. I want us to get back to farming, Black farming, which was decimated because of anti-Blackness by the United States Department of Agriculture. Make us tax exempt. Same thing they do for Native Americans. Have us have our own judicial system and our own policing system, like many Native American tribes have as well. So that is the gist of my reparations plan, called A Better Deal for Black America.
And what's interesting to me is you have, plenty of white politicians, but even Black politicians that talk about violence, against unarmed Black men, unequal treatment by police. And that's all good and well. Absolutely. There's horrible treatment, just assassinations of Black men, but they don't seem to view economic violence the same way. When you have all these statistics of the Black wealth gap in terms of income, this and that, and the fact that, bottom line, the original sin of America was violence against Black people, but then essentially never letting them to even get to the start of the race. Black people have always been, had to start the race, far, far after white people. Can you kind of talk about, to me, reparations is addressing that ongoing violence against Black people?
Exactly. We live in a country that has no issues. They did it with Japan. They did it with Germany. Did it with Italy after World War II. They said to those nations, you owe these people you wrong. Japan was pretty much mandated, in a sense, to do reparations for South Korea. Okay? The first thing the U.S. military did, my great-grandfather was there. He is still very much alive, a World War II vet. The first thing the U.S. military did after we defeated the Nazis, Black soldiers who weren't getting any justice themselves, was they made the Germans give all of the property and land back to the Jews that had their property and land stolen. Okay? People like to talk about the Irish were slaves. We all know that's a myth. They were indentured servants. But even though they were treated badly for that short period of time, it doesn't compare to the horrors that Black Americans went through. But even then, when the Irish would be free from their indentured servitude, there was a small number of them, they would still get land and property. May not have been the best quality, but they would have got something for their labor, what they went through. We were the only group freed, like Don Martin Luther King Jr. said it, freed to famine, freed to torture, freed to murder, freed to no shelter from the winds and for the rains. What I am saying, and for this, and I'm saying to this nation, it's not just what happened in chattel slavery. It's what happened afterwards, because actually the savagery shown to us at the hands of the federal government actually became much worse after slavery. They say as much as 20 to 25% of the Black population was murdered after slavery. People say pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. No other group has had to do that, because while this country was given hundreds of millions of acres of land to white Americans via the Homestead Act, from which 48 million white American families can trace their wealth to, we were building Black Wall Streets on our own, not just the one in Oklahoma, but in North Carolina, Virginia, Florida, South Carolina, California. They will either be burnt to the ground, they will either do eminent domain and steal our land. They were sometimes bombed by the U.S. military as in Oklahoma. So even when we did overcome all these insane odds, all America would do is take a bigger shovel, dig the hole even deeper for us, then throw the dirt on top of us and tell us it's your fault that you're in that hole that deep. What I am saying is that a study by City Financial, the Democrats and Republicans loved them some big banks. They said they were too big to fail. Well, one of those same banks did a study in 2021 saying that anti-Black racism has cost the U.S. economy $16 trillion since the year 2000. If we had done reparations then, we would be at least twice as wealthy because the U.S. economy, the GDP, is worth $19.2 trillion. We would be twice as wealthy. If we think that we are the apple of the world's eye now and everybody wants to come here, just envision what we would be twice as wealthy. That was the year 2000. Go to 1990. Go to 1980. Go to 1970, 1960, and imagine how much value America has lost because of not repairing the damage the federal government, it doesn't come from any U.S. citizen, has done to Black Americans, starting with slavery, but not ending there. Jim Crow, redlining, lynch mobs, debtors, vagrancy laws, sharecropping, you name it, the destruction of Black communities and towns. It has hurt America. It's like cutting your nose off and thinking you're not going to hurt your face.
Right. And let me ask you about Clyburn specifically. I've been down to South Carolina a few times, definitely a more conservative state, even among Democrats. But the district you're running in is one of the poorest districts in America. There's all sorts of problems. And I'm just digging in now. There seems to be a nuclear fuel facility that's been leaking radioactive fuel into groundwater, into soil for decades. Congressman Clyburn knows about it. Activists have said he hasn't done anything about it. What is the popularity of Congressman Clyburn? Because I look at, all right, people are pretty poor. I can't see anything major he's done for the people there, other than, familiarity and kind of the media, propping them up.
Before I get to that, because I really want to talk about that, let me give you some statistics here on my district. Congressman Clyburn has been over South Carolina District 6 for 30 years. Here's where we stand right now as we speak. The sixth poorest district in the United States of America by net worth per family, per household in the United States of America out of 435 districts. Third poorest for children out of 435 U.S. congressional districts. We have the highest eviction rate in the United States of America, okay? We have the most toxic water in the United States of America. We have some of the lowest performing schools, so poor that there's a whole region named in our honor. It's called the Corridor of Shame, which refers to a network of majority Black rural counties, where I went to school is one of them, Jasper County, where I've taught for my entire life is one of them, where the poverty rate is sky high, over 80% for the Black population, but the school failure rate is high too, where sometimes 90% of Black boys not reading or doing math on grade level. We have some of the highest rate of Black landlords here in this country. He has a community in Columbia, South Carolina, Richland County, that has some of the worst health outcomes in the United States of America. More Black people getting their arms and legs amputated, chopped off for avoidable health reasons than any other place in this district, okay? Why does he keep getting elected? It's not because he's so popular. It's because, one, we haven't had any options, no good ones. If you only have grits for breakfast and grits for breakfast, you're going to eat grits. That's one. Two, most Black Americans, as with most white Americans, over half really don't even show up to vote. And it's because of that reason, number one. There hasn't been any good options. My attitude, and the reason why I am running, is to say to people, if there is no one deserving of your vote, then you run and become the person deserving of a person's vote. And as a teacher, I always told my students, Mr. Dixon is never going to tell you to do something that I am not willing to do. So I am running to show people that the only way things are going to change is when we stand up and become the change we need. Another reason why Congressman Clyburn has stayed in power, it's not because most of us vote for him. It's the percentage of people that do vote have voted for him because of familiarity. And I'm going to say something that you can't say and better not say. It's because he's an older Black Southern man, and we naturally have respect for our elders as in the Black community. We naturally believe that someone who went through Jim Crow, went through redlining, was alive when the Ku Klux Klan was literally overtly active. We naturally want to believe he has our best interests at heart. And you know what? His data shows that he doesn't. And maybe in his heart he does. I can't speak for what's in his heart, but I can speak for what his record shows. And I said to people time and time again, if I'm wrong on his record, prove me wrong. I said that to his 2 daughters. I said it to his grandson. I said to his son-in-law. None of them have been able to prove me wrong. But you have the media here, because South Carolina is a pretty poor state, the 9th poorest state in America. It's a predominantly rural state. So we don't have big media outlets here to hold public officials accountable. They are all in his pocket. None of them interview me. None of them give me any press. And when they do, they say that I and the other candidates are long shots, that we haven't raised significant money. I've raised close to $200,000 in just 6 months. I just started 6 months ago. Unknown, no political connections, didn't want to run, just did it because, like I said, I want to be the example for my people and have this country repair the damage they've done to us. I've had over 45 interviews on some platforms that have millions of viewers. So the media protects him. The liberal media, the conservative media doesn't bother really going after him because my area is a predominantly Democratic district. So they feel there's no way a Republican is going to win. So they don't bother covering it. He's been protected. He has connections with people in power, and they promote him to the people they know. He's done good for them, but he hasn't done good for us. But they're not thinking about us. They're only thinking about themselves. So my race alone has probably done more to hold this man accountable than any politician or anyone on the ground has ever done.
And, you know, I should also add, he takes the most money from pharmaceutical companies of any congressman. I'm sure the healthcare outcomes down there in the 6th district aren't so
awful. Great. We have the lowest rate of insured people in South Carolina. If you read the state, which is a newspaper in Columbia, South Carolina, I'm surprised they did this. They did an article about Clyburn's district, a community in Columbia, the state capital, having the worst health outcomes in the U.S. I mentioned already, Black Americans getting their arms and legs chopped off. Once you have an amputation, your life expectancy after that is like 3 years. So we have some of the highest death rates, prematurely speaking. Clyburn's district is because we don't have health. We have healthcare deserts and food deserts. People are getting their arms and legs chopped off for avoidable healthcare reasons, about which Clyburn has done nothing. You mentioned radioactive waste. That was news to me because the articles that I mentioned to you were in North Charleston, where you have Black Americans there who have complained for years. We had 2 chemical explosions. I believe the chemical was ethylene oxide. One happened in 1991. I remember when it happened because even I'm only an hour from Charleston, and they told us we had the what you call it when you get the beep. We had the advisory alert go off in our area. 1991, 6 people died, I believe, and 33 people were injured. Chemical waste. Then it happened again in 2001. That area is still monitored by the EPA, okay, because they still believe it might be hazardous. Then you have the ports, and you have all these diesel fuel trucks going through these majority Black neighborhoods. And while people, of course, connected to Clyburn want to say they've done studies, and the studies have said it's only moderately polluted, the data has shown from Center for Disease Controls that the rate of asthma there among Black Americans has increased by as much as 50%, whereas for the white community who doesn't live as close to the ports, just 5% or 5 times more compared to 20 to 50 times more. The rate of cancer among the Black community has been almost 50% more than what was expected. And yet they want to tell the Black people there, oh, and by the way, North Charleston also has the most toxic water in the United States of America. And yet they want to tell the Black Americans there, mainly poor, mainly Gullah Geechee people, a Creole culture, America's only English-based Creole culture, like me, they want to tell us that it's all good. Just like in Denmark, South Carolina, also Clyburn's district, where they were putting an untested, unapproved chemical in these majority Black, majority older Black people's drinking water for 10 years. The people don't trust the water. Yet you have these institutions telling them the water's fine, drink it, just like they're doing in Flint. Flint gets more attention because it's a larger city. Denmark is a small majority Black town, 3,000 people. It's supposed to be Clyburn's job to bring attention to this. Yet Bernie Sanders brought water. He brought pallets of water for people in Clyburn's district to get. Last time I checked, Bernie is a senator in Vermont, not in South Carolina. Bernie's state is a majority white state. Why is he having to come to Clyburn's majority Black district to give majority Black people clean drinking water, while Clyburn is the third most powerful Democrat in office?
Absolutely.
It's criminal, the neglect this man has shown us. I've lived through his neglect. I went to the corridor of shame schools. Yet, you look at his record. Black Americans here, most of us live on land that's called heirs property. If anyone's never heard of it, I'm going to give you a quick breakdown. It's when you inherit your land without a will, so everyone has to get, every family member, generation that is in charge gets shares of the property. If anyone loses their share, either they sell it or they're forced to sell, they lose it, they can buy everyone else out. You can have 10 family members living on 40 acres of coastal fertile property. They go to usually a racist anti-Black judge. He will say, give these Negroes just $1,000 each, $10,000. You get 40 acres of property that's worth $500,000. Happen all the time. Look through Clyburn's record. He has not written one piece of legislation to address the issue of heirs property. Even when you keep your property, you don't get equity from it. One study done in Georgia, Alabama, and North Carolina, they did a sample of 12 counties. The value of the property, majority Black counties, was $670 billion. But those Black families don't get a penny from it, because when you have heirs property, you don't get federal grants, you don't get federal loans, no one gets equity from the property. So imagine all the wealth that we could have if Clyburn would have stood up in his 30 years and written legislation to deal with it. It's a state level issue, but it's only a state level issue because no one in the federal government, besides Tim Scott, believe it or not, who's trying to do something with it now, has addressed it from the federal level. Schools. We all know schools are, we know education will be the great equalizer, but it can't be. Education is inherently unequal in America because it's based on property taxes. You are fortunate enough to live in a rich zip code, your property taxes is high. If you're like me and you grew up in a poor county, and I still live here, your property taxes are this low. That already sets kids who need the most resources at a disadvantage. I have a plan to have a state standard where every kid, irrespective of where they live, gets their schools get equitable funding. If some schools are able to do more, that's great, but no school will be do without. Clyburn has 30 years to write such legislation. He has not. Transportation. Black Americans, this being a majority Black district, 50 to 60%, are the most likely to be without a vehicle. Even someone in the country legally is more likely to have a vehicle than a Black American, okay? People often get a vehicle. We're the most likely Black Americans have our vehicles repossessed. I have a plan to introduce a system where people will get assistance with the first 3 down payments, but not just that. Sometimes people get a car, one flat tire can send someone in the poorhouse. I've seen that happen with the families I've taught. I have a plan where we partner with these small businesses, car mechanics, and we have a government system the same way we have food assistance, car maintenance assistance, flat tires, oil changes, shocks, air filters. So that way people don't have to spend most of their check paying a car note and then paying to keep the car maintenance. Person has to qualify for it. Those details I will iron out once I get the Congress set up my commission. The point I'm making is from education to land ownership and land theft for Black Americans to healthcare deserts, food deserts, Congressman Clyburn has had 30 years to deal with this. It is insane for anyone to think giving him 2 more years is going to make a big difference when he hasn't done it in 30 years. I have a plan to deal with all these things.
And, let me ask you also, because everything you're talking about, it's unbelievable that he's still a congressperson there, considering all the poverty, health problems, water. I saw that Denmark water situation, which is still a disaster.
It's still happening. Exactly.
Yeah, that the media barely covers. So with all that, what does it say to you that, I don't know, Clyburn seems to be spending more time, parachuting into Texas to try and stop progressive, woman of color who looked like she was on the verge of winning, Jessica Cisneros. He dropped in to support the only anti-choice candidate, Henry Cuellar. He also dropped in to try and stop Nina Turner in Ohio.
Yeah.
It seems that he is more intent on spending his time nationally sabotaging progressive candidates than doing anything in his own district.
First of all, I blame the media. Everybody wants to talk about Fox News and Breitbart. We don't talk about the bias of the so-called liberal media, okay? We don't talk enough about that. Why is it that MSNBC, okay, just for example, why have they not called Clyburn out about all these statistics that are verifiable that I saw you looking them up, that are truthful? Why has he not been called out for all the failures of his district? Why is it that they aren't calling out the fact that he's going there talking about Nina Turner, who, I feel that Nina Turner should have ran a platform that was more speaking to the needs of Black Americans. But one thing about Nina Turner, she supports universal health care. She feels it's a human right, as do I. My main platform is reparations, but universal health care is a big thing. That should be a given. Healthcare, education, you should have that free of charge. Yeah, government can't pay for it because they sure pay for everything else, like wars right now and given to Ukraine, okay? Why is it that these candidates did not call out Clyburn's failure? I think some of us have been playing way too nice in politics. I don't ever lie about my opponent, but I am going to call a spade a spade. We also have to call out the so-called liberal media that wants to call out Fox News for being awful, which, I can agree they are, but don't want to also shine a light on themselves and how they give cover to candidates like Clyburn. Because even though we have Republicans in Congress like Mitch McConnell, who I would say is awful, it's not Mitch McConnell getting the most money from pharmaceuticals. Okay, Clyburn is one of the top recipients of pharmaceutical money. So if you want to know why he goes so hard against people like Nina Turner, who's for universal health care, that's why right there. If you want to know why his district, which has the least amount of people, will have the most amount of people that don't have access to health insurance, which, was a lot of my relatives who don't have jobs and can't find them, that's why right there. He puts his own interests ahead of the needs of his people. When he was asked, after Joe Biden, who I cannot stand, was elected to office, when he was asked by reporter George Stephanopoulos, what do you feel Joe Biden owes you? He said, I don't want nothing. I just want a country where my children and grandchildren can aspire and pursue their dreams. Excuse me? You are a congressman for the people of South Carolina District 6, one of the poorest districts in the United States of America. That was your time right there to tell Joe Biden, your district, your people need health care. The Black people of your district have had hundreds of thousands, millions of acres stolen. They need compensation. He only put forth his children and grandchildren. So when I read this report about him spending hundreds of thousands of campaign donations on his children and grandchildren, I was not surprised. He's made it very clear about whom he's concerned, and it's not the people of South Carolina District 6.
And I'm curious because you said you had conversations with his grandchildren and et cetera. Were they trying to persuade you not to run, or you just had conversations just organically?
I was invited to, I didn't know this at the time, Clyburn's community is a historically Black community called Greenview in Columbia, South Carolina. It was one of the few Black communities that was started when the little bit of money Black Americans got from the GI Bill. Because, most of that billions and trillions of dollars now went to white veterans. We were excluded from, even though we fought for this nation. That was a community that was built from the little bit of money that we were actually able to get. And all of his family members were there. He was there too. I didn't know he would be there, but I stood my ground. And of course, his two daughters, grandson and son-in-law, were trying to make excuses for him. No one could ever answer why we are this. They either want to make excuses, oh, it's the Republicans' fault. I say this, yes, the Republicans are awful, but Black Americans, we vote for the Democrats 95%. So when I want to see results for my people, I'm not going to look to the Republicans. I ain't voting for them. I'm going to look to you. And if you're telling me that even when the Democrats have control over the House, the Senate, and the presidency, you still can't get things done, then that means I need to be voting for the Republicans because they're more powerful than you are. I say to people, if you want to give him credit for the good he's done, which I don't know what that is, okay, give him credit for the good. But if you're going to give him credit for the good, that means he's darn sure going to take responsibility for the bad. You can't give him credit for the good while at the same time saying he is not responsible for the bad. You can't have it both ways. So they were trying to defend his record, but when I asked them about these statistics and proved me wrong, neither of them could do it. He's been avoiding a debate. I've written all the state newspapers, the state paper of Columbia, Post and Courier of Charleston, WTOC of Savannah, WSAV of Savannah, because they cover my area. I've written papers in Columbia, Charleston. I've written the DNC. My supporters have called the DNC, the state DNC, saying that he has a responsibility to the citizens of South Carolina to have a debate, to defend his record and prove to them why he's the best candidate for a job. He's refused to debate me. But then I did research on Nancy Pelosi and found out she hasn't had a debate in over 30 years. So it's no surprise that he's following in the footsteps of his leader. They think they're not supposed to be held accountable. He is hoping to win the way he's always won. He avoids debates. He avoids discussing his record. He hopes nobody studies his record, but I have, and he hopes that the media just gives him all the good coverage he needs and ignores his opponent. That's what they've been doing, ignoring me, hoping that my message has not gotten to enough people so they can still vote for him out of ignorance, not knowing how awful he's been. That is why I am thankful to the underground media for giving me a voice, because the media here in South Carolina and nationally have been covering for this man. So they are just as responsible for his awful record and for the poverty and the suffering my people here experience.
I'd like to ask you also, and I'm definitely careful because I'm a white dude, so I don't want to say anything inappropriately, but it's always been kind of perplexing to me when I'm on the campaign trail, because I covered the 2016 presidential campaign, 2020. And when I was in South Carolina, it was frustrating to me because I know all the bad things Joe Biden has done that have really, really hurt Black people. So when I interviewed supporters of his who were Black, obviously you don't want to condescend or say anything like I'm trying to explain something to you. But what are your thoughts on that? Because, Clyburn, if not for Clyburn, I think Biden would have won South Carolina, but I don't think by 30 points.
Right.
Objectively, Bernie Sanders' record is a whole lot better than Joe Biden's record in terms of race, economic wealth. I don't think Bernie goes far enough. I think he should have been for reparations. But what are your thoughts? Because I was frustrated and I'm white. So that Clyburn went to bat for Biden, who, I mean, I was in South Carolina in 2016. I remember I was interviewing folks at a barbershop, and they told me that literally, Bill Clinton, through his crime bill, had built new jails right down the block, and that was Joe Biden's crime bill. What are your thoughts?
Right by the poor, dilapidated schools. If you go to areas like Estill, South Carolina, which is in my district, Hampton County, they have a nice built prison right by an old, dilapidated school in a majority Black community. That's the Biden's legacy. One thing I'm glad you said, I'm glad you realized that Biden would have probably won South Carolina anyway, and that's still despicable. So people act like Clyburn has some power. He doesn't, but Clyburn definitely helped. However, the fact that Biden even won, it just goes to the level of party loyalty that Black Americans have that we should not to the Democratic Party. They are supposed to be loyal to us. They exist because of us. We don't exist because of them. The fact of the matter is, Biden's crime bill locked up more Black people since the days of chattel slavery. His crime bill led to investments for states to build prisons, not good schools, not colleges, not universities, but prisons to lock up Black people. Not just that, before he wrote the crime bill, let's talk about how he was good friends with segregationists, one of them being South Carolina's infamous Strom Thurmond, who was not just a segregationist, was a Ku Klux Klan member who has the record of having the longest filibuster on record just because he wanted to stop Black Americans from having rights. Biden did not just work with him. Clyburn tried to defend Biden's they didn't call me boy, they called me sir. Of course, Clyburn came out trying to defend that. Biden didn't just work with these segregationist scumbags. He was friends with them. He wrote them letters praising them, thanking them for keeping Black kids out of better funded schools. Not only that, he made a comment that he didn't want Black kids in his children's school because he didn't want it to become a racial jungle. When asked about reparations, Bernie Sanders' record on race is better, but I don't mean it's good, because Bernie Sanders, being a Jewish person who has relatives, like you've already mentioned, that gets reparations, has always spoken against Black Americans getting reparations. That being said, though, Bernie Sanders didn't say this part. Biden, when asked about reparations in the 1970s, at the same time, the Democrats were getting Black votes, said he'll be damned if he feels responsible to pay for the sins of his forefathers. This is the same guy, though. The same guy. The moment he gets in office, he rescinds a lot of stuff Donald Trump did. So he doesn't mind dealing with things of the past. This is the same guy right now who is pushing for LGBTQ people who are not able to marry to get reparations because of laws that prevented same-sex loving people from marrying. So he's okay with dealing with things of the past. He just doesn't want to deal with the issues of Black Americans. That is my people's fault because we have this stupid issue of party loyalty. I will tell you right now, if a white Republican comes along and they have a Black agenda, and they're supporting reparations like the Republican Party is the founder of reparations for Black Americans, I will support them in a minute. We need to stop voting for party and vote for policies. So what you saw with Biden, which was absolutely asinine, was us voting for a party instead of voting for policies. Because if we were looking at it for policies, Biden shouldn't have even been a consideration, considering that this man is a segregationist. Is anti-Black. And he shows it with these comments he makes, telling people, if you don't vote for him, you ain't Black. The man is still a segregationist.
And by the way, I mean, at the end of the day, Biden also never apologized for the crime bill. He claimed it didn't actually usher in mass incarceration. And, objectively, based on my conversations with voters, in South Carolina, it seems they were voting for him not just out of Democratic Party loyalty, but out of loyalty to former President Obama.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I need to say something about that. it was more of a vote against Donald Trump than it was for Biden. But let me explain to you why that scares the hell out of me. No one likes Biden, okay? Everyone knows that. Republicans know it. The far right people know it. Democrats know it. The far left people know it. No one likes Biden. They voted against Trump. Here's why this scares me. I have been hearing black people in my majority black, majority rural district literally say, man, you know what? Donald Trump wasn't so bad. Oh, man, I miss Trump nowadays. I am telling you, it's scary. But that is what I'm hearing. When you have people here literally saying that, no, maybe Trump wasn't so bad and that they miss him, you know you got to be doing an awful job. And no one expected this man to do good. But he is even exceeding my low expectations. Okay? He's worse than even I thought he can be. And I already knew he was going to be awful.
Right.
And I didn't vote for him. And last time I checked, I'm still pretty black.
And let me ask you, you teach at a charter school, which I'm sure you know a lot of progressives have problems with. I'm not a big fan myself. You've taught for, you said, about 17 years. What are your thoughts overall on charter schools and whether they help or hinder public education?
You see, this is where I am black first and not a Democrat first. I'm black way before I'm a Democrat. Charter schools can be problematic. Okay, like everything in this country, the history of charter schools is rooted in anti-blackness. But that's everything. Hell, the history of the police is rooted in anti-blackness. Charter schools can be problematic, but it depends on how they are regulated. In the charter school where I work, first of all, the directors of a lot of these charter schools, we need to look into their records. A lot of them don't start these schools because they care about the black people there. They start these schools and they see a business opportunity and they want to capitalize off of black poverty. So let's be honest about that. Yes, charter schools can be used as a way to pretty much legalize school segregation. I'm going to say something like some jaws drop. I'm actually perfectly fine with majority black schools and majority black teachers. We should have never given up our majority black schools. The integration was forced on us and forced that. I am for Black Americans having more school choice. I am actually for us as Black Americans, descendants of American slaves, freedmen. A part of my plan is for us to be a special, distinct class, which we already are, and to have millions of dollars, billions of dollars set aside for us to open our own charter schools for our kids, our black teachers having our own curriculum, teaching our own history. Charter schools, from my experience, can be a good thing. I started teaching at this charter school 10 years ago. I would get kids coming in 20% reading on or above grade level. Highest would be 30%. By the time they left me, they were at 75% or above. I was able to do that in a year. Clyburn's had, well, no, not a year, 8 months. Clyburn's had 30 years. So compare what a teacher's able to do, going through all the stuff we go through with no power, to what Clyburn has been able to do in 30 years. So charter schools can be a force for good. But like with anything, there has to be regulations. There has to be standards that are met. You should not be allowed to start a charter school, fail, while still getting funds. And these charter school directors are getting 6 figures, but they're not doing any significantly better than the local school. You also should invest in the local non-charter school. But I believe in people having options, especially Black Americans who have historically, violently had all our options taken from us.
Right. And last question, let me ask you, because overall, I don't know if you've noticed, but, you know, in the progressive movement, there's a lot of people now who don't want to vote for anybody, a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't matter if Jesus is running. If they're running as a Democrat, they're not voting because of the corruption of the party. Obviously, you're running as a Democrat against Congressman Clyburn. But what do you say to those people? Because, you know, my view is I look at the person. Obviously, we know, you know, even people in the squad and others have ran on, you know, fighting the Democratic Party, but have basically gone along and not really been fighting. But to me, does that mean I cancel Marcel Dixon before looking into him because he's running as a Democrat? So what are your thoughts? Because there's a lot of people who won't give anyone a chance if they're running as a Democrat.
I've gone through that. You know, I'm running against Clyburn. I've committed some grave sin according to a small segment of the population, mainly older Black men. Not a lot of them, but at least 30% of them. My thing is this. If Clyburn was the only option I had, I would not vote for him. Okay? I will look at him and say, this man has nothing good for me. He ain't done nothing good for me. What I say to people, look into the people's policies. Stop voting for a Democrat just because you've always been a Democrat. If the Republican has better policies, get your tail there and vote for that Republican. If you are a Republican, stop voting for a Republican just because they're a Republican. If the Democrat has better policies for you, vote for the Democrat. It is the dumbest thing to just vote for a letter. Vote for the policies, not the party. If you do your research and you see that all of these candidates suck, then you need to become the person to run. If none of them deserve your vote, you run and become the person who is deserving of people's votes. That's what I did. Look, I don't come from wealth. I still live my head barely above the poverty line, okay? My family's head, like most Black Americans who are college educated, I don't enjoy wealth. One, I don't make enough, but two, even when I do make a little bit of money, I have to help my family members out who are living in poverty. So I haven't been able to enjoy the fruit of my labor. The American dream has eluded me like it's eluded many Black Americans, even those of us who went to college and got a professional job. But I'm a teacher, so I was never expecting it to begin with. That's a whole other story. But my point is this. I ran with no money, no connections, no name recognition. No one knew me. And now I've been on, on, like I said, platforms that have millions of subscribers. People write me every day saying, I'm going to be the first person they've ever voted for. Some people said they've never in their life donated to a politician. I'm the first. Some people are now saying to me, they're going to run next year because of me. We have to be the change we want to see. I know that sounds cliche, but it's true. The only reason people like Clyburn and all these people have been able to sit there and get away with 30 years of doing nothing because we have let them. So don't just say, I'm not going to participate. Don't say I'm not going to vote. Say I'm going to lead. That's what I would say to those people.
Absolutely. And tell people where can people find out more about you? Obviously, the election, early voting's now, and the actual elections next week.
So yeah, early voting starting at May 31st. It goes to June 10th. And the election day is June 14th. You can find out more about me at marcelforcongress.com/donate. And yes, please donate if you can. This is the final stretch. Clyburn has billboards all throughout my district now. Yard signs all throughout my district. Y'all, I've lived here my entire life, okay? I've lived here for the past decade when Clyburn took over my county, became a part of his district. This man, he never done a billboard before. He never done yard signs before. He's actually having to work, okay? We can do this. I have billboards all over, commercials, texts, emails. Any donation you could make will go to at least, if nothing else, even if it doesn't get me elected, it will go to holding these people accountable, showing them that if you don't represent us, you will be replaced by us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'll definitely keep in touch with you, and good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.